Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
So we were talking about mineralization yesterday, and I switched around your schedule a little bit. The first hour we'll still talk about mineralization because I think that's really one of the parts where we understand some things, but we don't understand a lot, and there's a lot to be done here. So if you remember, we started with geosequestration. We started with this slide. And we said that mineral trapping takes thousands of years, if not tens of thousands of years. And so we are over here. And what we found was that that's really not true. And so we will check what the rates are and how we think of these things today. Let me just adjust this so I see where I am. Okay. What we have is evidence, and we discussed this yesterday. We have a basalt that was exposed to 32 weeks of DI water with carbon dioxide at 10 MPa and 90 degrees C. And there is encrustation with calcite. You can see out here, this is a high resolution. This is just an optical image. This is a high resolution SEM image, and you see that there are calcite and magnesium rich, calcium rich and magnesium rich locations here, which means that things are being dissolved out and precipitated as carbonates. So we know that that's happening, and that's not in years, it's in weeks' time. We also know that there are projects that are currently being done where this is an older project, Wallula, CarbFix, started a few years ago, and they both looked at injecting carbon dioxide into the subsurface and fixing the fluid as a carbonate. There's slight differences. In Wallula, there was carbon dioxide injected in a pressurized state. And that's the concept which was there. There are cap rock flood basalts. These are impermeable. They are not going to transport anything. There are beds of basalts, but not continuous. And so the thought is that this would just go through and keep permeating and reacting with all of this here. Now, these basalts are old basalts. In CarbFix, the basalts are very young. These are young lavas, tens of thousands of years, or thousands of years, sometimes hundreds of years, sometimes as recent as yesterday. So this is very young. It has a lot of gas dissolved in it, and so they have a lot of permeability, porosity. These are vesicular rocks, which means that they have small degassing pores. What they're doing is they're taking carbon dioxide, water, they have a dissolution tower. Those two are mixed together, and water with dissolved carbon dioxide is pumped in the subsurface. They have since switched and stopped using water. They are now using brine from the, and that's done the same way. In this case, the mineralization happened in days. When I visited them a couple of weeks ago, this is very shallow. This might be, I had the temperature pressure conditions. These temperatures might be 70, 80 degrees C. Depths might be 50, 100 meters, 200 meters, not very deep. So that's sort of the environment these guys are in. This is much deeper. This is deep. The Columbia River basalt outcrops in places, but this is much deeper. Both are basalts. Both are basalts. One is young basalt, one is old basalt. It's in Washington State, not Washington, D.C. So the porosity is in the carb-fix rocks, the porosity is 20-30%. In Wallula, it is 10-15%. It's lower. It depends on what seam you're in. And permeability here is mainly due to fractures. Over here, the permeability is more when the vesicles coalesce and they form a continuous pathway. So permeability here could be in tens and hundreds of millidarcy. I measured Wallula rocks for the project here, and those were in the millidarcy to microdarcy range, depending on the depth. So this thing changes when you close here. The primary conduit is fractures. If fractures close, permeability is gone. Out here, there is still enough permeability because the vesicles are interconnected. So usually what happens is you have a magma which is full of gas that starts to flow. As it flows, it degasses. So you get these vesicles that are drawn out. In Hawaii, for example, those big lava tubes are used as water storage. That's a very common storage location. So there is a big difference between these two in terms of porosity and permeability, in terms of accessibility to reactive surfaces. There is also a difference here, which we are still trying to understand, and that is the difference between young and old basalt flows. We don't know whether that makes a difference. Yes. So the way the carb-fix, they fix the problem by controlling pH. If you have low pH, you don't form a carbonate. It's a dissolution environment. You increase the pH, it becomes a precipitation environment. So they control it by controlling pH, and that's monitored very carefully if need be. And there's a slight difference here. They not only inject carbon dioxide, but they're now also looking to inject part of H2S. So it's a little bit of sour gas that is being injected here. That in turn also controls the pH very dramatically. So the control is not by, sometimes you can control precipitation. You can prevent precipitation by injecting at very high pressure and very high rates, or you can control precipitation by controlling pH. So you have a soluble environment, and then when you want things to precipitate, then you flip the pH to be a more basic environment. Yes, so that's another concept to say you can put in more aggressive acids. In the case of carb-fix, you don't need it because it is already very, the access to fluids is pretty large, so you don't really need it. In some cases, for example, in Wallula, or in cases where you have all of the vesicular parts of the basalt are collapsed, there are no vesicles left. All you're left with is fractures. Fractures don't have much storage capacity. What we need is not just the flow, fluid mobility, but we also need a storage capacity for that fluid. And so you can enhance the flow by opening up the fractures, either through pressure or through dissolution. You cannot really enhance the storage capacity as much, because if you're dissolving, you have to precipitate somewhere, you have to get the fluid out somewhere. So that's the efficient way to do that is to image and find out where you have more of the vesicular parts of basalt rather than the massive flows. and you can map those. So the part that is required in older basalts is to find out where you have the top region of the basalt. Usually, top region is where it starts to degas, and you get all of the vesicles forming. The lower below, it's laminar flow, it's mostly massive, and you don't get much pore space. We don't like to say fracking in the US, I think, because it's a very dangerous word. As soon as you say fracking, every project is done. So normally we say we stimulate. And yes, you have to fracture your way in, or oftentimes you will target with a very detailed geology or geologic description to say, for example, if you have these, usually flood basalts happen in episodic events. So you have one flood basalt, then you have the interlayer, and then you have flood basalt, you have interlayer. So you look for, usually at the top, you will get the vesicular structures. So you are targeting where you have the vesicular basalts. That's what you're really trying to map out. The challenge becomes seismic is not very sensitive. Yes, yes, yes. Everywhere. We're looking for storage capacity. Where can we get maximum fluid in? Because if you think of your porosity, maybe 2 to 5% of your porosity is in fractures. The rest is in vesicles or pores. So volume-wise, fractures don't contribute. Flow-wise, fractures contribute. So it's sort of the opposite. Flow-wise, your pores might contribute 5 to 10%. Your fractures will contribute 90%. So you have to match both of them. You need the pores, you need the vesicles to store, but you also need the fractures to get your fluid out into far away. There are thoughts of doing horizontal drilling and getting the fluid out for further away, and you can use the technology from shales where you do multi-stage laterals, you drill very long laterals, and you perforate at discrete intervals. So that's another way. But in shales, it's lucrative to do that because you're getting more oil out. In the case of CCS, it is not a paying proposition. Horizontal wells are expensive. So it's a cost effectiveness. How much do you gain for what you spend? So with all of the work that was done at Wallula, at CarbFix, and with other people, it was time to revise. This is what we started with. This is mineral trapping. And so there is now a newer paper that has come out from the same authors with a number of other authors who say, well, okay, this still holds because they can't say this was wrong. This still holds, but it holds only for sedimentary, conventional sedimentary environments. And these you think of as basalt, as sandstones. So in sandstones, mineralization is a slow process. I'm not so sure if I agree with that because we have seen alterations of arcosic sandstones happening over weeks. If you leave our plagioclase and feldspar which are contained in a sandstone in a mild acid, in a carbonic acid mixture, you will get mineralization very quickly. Quickly meaning within weeks. So not within years, but within weeks, within a month's time, or the 32 weeks where you had complete encrustation of the hand specimen of basalt, you would get a fair amount of alteration. In the case of mafic rocks, these are rocks that have much more soluble or exchangeable cations. Carbonation process was quantified with reactive and non-reactive tracers and isotopes. And what they showed was there was rapid mineralization with 95% of the gas that was mineralized within 2 years. And that's the beauty of what this process holds for us. if you can get volumes of carbon dioxide in, we are very confident of permanence of storage. And that's the part which is appealing, which has many people working on it. And so we can count up what happens during CCS. We can look at effects, we can say parameters affected by it, what models exist, and what do you need as inputs to do those models. And that sort of a work can be done for any formation that you're in. So here's some of the data that is being collected in my lab with ocean drilling program. Basalts, these are a number of samples. This is porosity permeability data collected in the lab as a function of pressure, and pressure going from 500 to 1500 psi. And so you get 3 different distinct clusters that we then use for further study. The rocks look somewhat like this. This is the mineral composition. Most of them have a fair amount of pyroxenes. These are rich in magnesium and iron. Plagioclase, second highest component, and that is calcium and magnesium. These are all silicates. So iron, magnesium silicates, calcium, magnesium silicates. And then a fair amount of smectite, because they are from the ocean. And so they have been, some of them have been altered. And you can see that over here, these are smectites that are lining these bergs that are formed as an alteration product. So this is something that we should expect to see as we go forward with more alterations. The steps are to measure pressure sensitivity. So there are a couple of things to measure, right? One is what is the pressure sensitivity, because we'll be changing pressure. The second one is fluid sensitivity, because we'll be injecting different types of fluids. And the third one is reaction sensitivity, because the fluids will be reacting. And so the student, I should have put his name here, Mario, is looking at each one independently so that he can build a multi-component model to account for mineralogy, for fluid, and for mineralization. These are some of the initial tests that are done, and comparisons with the models. Models over-predict what we are measuring at the moment. We will see how far we get and what refinements need to be made. Together with that, this is a micro CT image. This is an X-ray image. This is what a part of the rock looks like. This is 1 millimeter over here, 1000 microns. And so we have a very small segment of the rock. What we are looking at is where the mineralization takes place. Are we dissolving out here, or are we making our way into these sort of clusters, and are we pulling out these lighter colored minerals, or are we attacking more the glacier parts of the basalt? These are 2 different types of materials, and you can see we have different zones here. This is one type of mineralogy. This is another one. These are most probably our pyroxenes. And so the critical issue becomes, if we start dissolving the matrix, we lose mechanical integrity of the rock. If we dissolve out these sort of larger phenocrysts, larger crystal grains, then we're not really changing much in the mechanical integrity. So the question really, what we are trying to answer is, what part of this material is reactive and how? As we do this, we measure stiffness so that we know as the dissolution progresses, we should be looking at either the column of vesicular basalt collapsing on itself or becoming stiffer because we are strengthening everything. Once the baseline is done, then Mario plans to put in single fluids in this pressure time diagram of loading and unloading. And then once that is done, there is a team of students there. One looks at flow, and that means you put in a fluid that is flown through the rock, that flows through the rock, and you have the same concentration of carbon dioxide over time. Whatever is spent goes out on one side, new fluid enters. So you keep doing this, which means you're successively dissolving out and transporting out whatever is dissolved. That's one way of doing it. The other one is to inject and let it sit there and see what defines steady state in the experiments. So you're precipitating and dissolving, and the question we are asking is, does steady state mean that you have dissolved as much as you could and precipitated as much as you could, and everything is in equilibrium, nothing happens anymore? Or is steady state a continuous series of dissolution reprecipitation? Over geologic times, we know that this continuous dissolution reprecipitation happens. We do not know if it will happen in this case or not. There are some indications from crushed rock studies that say, yes, indeed, there is a steady state reached, but those are poorly constrained. So what we want to do is have control measurements on the same type of material, one flow through, one soaking, over a longer period of time. We know from previous experiments that this part here, the soaking, never reaches steady state in carbonates. If you do this in carbonates with an acid, it keeps progressing, you keep dissolving, you create porosity, you sit for a longer time, you destroy that porosity that was created. And so there is a possibility if you do flow through, which is what you will do. So when we do these tests with the, here, we are really flowing material, and this is a constant flow, which means near injection point, near the wellbore, it's a continuous flow experiment. There is new reactive fluid coming in, and so we might be dissolving quite a bit here. As the fluid makes its way through, we are not producing anything, which means that now the fluid is going in a place and we are reaching a steady state, which we still don't understand, but it is a soaking experiment then. And so that part is what we are trying to assess and change and see how far do we get in this type of rock here. We don't know. Stay tuned. Maybe next year the student Mario has to graduate, which means next year he should have something for us. Sorry? This right now is research grade CO2, 99.9%, 99.2%. We have taken research grade. The industrial grade carbon dioxide has moisture in it, so it's really not that, and some other impurities. We have not yet gone to adding some impurities yet, because right now we are trying to deal with the pure system. So at the moment it's research grade. The brine is prepared using DI water and controlled amounts of solids that match the brine composition in Iceland. Well, actually in the ocean drilling program in Norway. So this is offshore Norway where the samples are from. We know what the salinity is. We know the composition, the entire TDS. So we reformulate this brine here, and then research grade carbon dioxide. We have not gone to H2S. I don't want to have H2S in my lab, but we might try C1, C2, something of that sort, to say, does it harm, does it promote, what does it do? We haven't gone the route of trying out different things or trying out agents that would promote even more mineralization. We haven't gone that way yet.
Ma'am, when
Yes.
you were talking, these all experiments which has been done, soaking and that kind of experiment, that is done on the core sample itself,
Yes.
which has been collected from the ground.
Yes. So these samples come from about 600 meters below the seafloor.
Okay, so when there in the previous slide, when you're talking about
Yep.
the confining pressure, so that is the pressure of the fluid which is being injected, or the pressure to maintain the actual condition of the ground?
So there are two types of pressures we talk about. One is the confining pressure, that's from all sides. That's the overburdens, you can say. And then there is the pore pressure, that's the fluid pressure. Okay, so we maintain both of those. So you have the confining pressure that matches the in situ conditions plus a bit more, because we know we have basalts even below. So we are creating the experiments for the entire depth of basalts. So confining pressure is the surrounding overburden pressure. There they are. The two students are working on it. This is Mario. He's the main student involved in it. Dorothy, you heard her before. She's the one who talked about her home in Kenya a long time, and almost 100 years ago last week. And she is the senior student, so she's advising Mario on how to do the work, and really making sure that Mario is doing the work properly. So she's the one with the stick and saying, you should not do this. These are CT images, raw images here, segmented images here. This, Dorothy threw this back at him, the data, and said, you will collect better data because we need to be able to separate out things like this. So this is after Dorothy sort of shook Mario up and said, this is not acceptable. So I show this because I find it amusing that she threw this back and said, we are not accepting this. This is not how we work in our lab. And so he's gone back and collected much better data now, because we want to be able to determine where exactly and what exactly is altering. This is what the sample looks like. These are vesicles. This is open. Here you can see, in some cases, you can see the alteration parts out here. You should be able to see right here, over here, here, maybe you can see it out here. These are already altered minerals that have been precipitated in the vesicles. For us, the question is, this is what happened when there was no carbon dioxide present, except what was naturally present. If we add more carbon dioxide, what is going to happen? Will we pretty much repeat what has happened already? Or will it be more aggressive and exploit these sort of pathways that might exist and channel its way through and combine up multiple vesicles? If that happens, are we going to see a coalescence of these clusters, for example, which would give it very poor mechanical stability? So if you look over here, there is a steady row of vesicles that are present. And if we start dissolving between them, there's nothing to prevent this whole thing from collapsing or the rock from collapsing on the side. We don't want to be doing that, because if we do that, all of the structures that we've made on this to inject, to do our well preparation, they get damaged. We cannot use them anymore. We have seen this happen at Sleipner. Sleipner was a chalk reservoir. As they were producing from the chalk, pressures changed. As the pressures changed, the whole area had subsidence, which means they lost platforms, which is a very expensive thing to lose. All of the wellbores started warping because of the down thrust of the overlying sediments, because of the pressure difference, because of production. In this case, we would have excess pressure and we might frack our way through, which means this becomes a zone of weakness, which means that it starts to collapse on itself. So those are some of the things that that need to be assessed, and we do want to quantify long-term fluid migration pathways. What are fluid mobilization maps? At the moment, we can't go into a field and say, I have a structure like this, I know the porosity permeability, the fluid mobilization pathways will be determined, can be determined. We cannot. We also want to have integrity of cements. Cements will alter. How are they going to alter? What should we make the cements out of? And finally, do we need special permits for reactive sites? At the moment in the US, you have one permit to inject carbon dioxide, whether it's at reactive sites or non-reactive. Doesn't matter. So there is a lot of potential there. Part of this work, which I've presented from Mario and with Dorothy acting as the advisor, is a part of a multinational project. This is PERBAS. It was started by the Norwegian Research Council with many other countries buying into the program, putting in money, and every country that participates gets its own funding from its government. So we have collaborators on this from Germany, Norway, US, India. I think NGRI is part of this, IIT Roorkee is part of this, and IISER Bhopal is part of the PERBAS, along with the University of Oslo and the Volcanic Basin Research Institute, and the lead is in Geomar in Kiel, Germany. Actually, the lead is a person we both studied together, so I know him from earlier, and we connected when we were writing this and decided we would do basalt pathways of mineralization, and we gathered the team together. So that's how that came about. The main things there are to explore the interactions, what interactions happen, what is the potential for sequestration, how much can we sequester, not theoretical amounts, but practical amounts determined by experiments, determined by field tests, and define what is success. Is success storing carbon dioxide? Is success doing it faster, quicker, or doing it long term but more amounts? So what exactly is success? What are the pressure temperature conditions? What is the combination? What is the optimization process to have enough fractures but also enough large pores? They normally don't go together. And so what is the combination that you need so that you can screen your potential targets in this way? And then the competition, as I said, between surface area and fluid chemistry. Okay, so that much on reactive basalts. I think the part which will be really critical is to figure out how this process works in a site-specific region. What we are doing in Norway might not be relevant for the Deccan basalts. That's the challenge. The challenge really is, how do you get enough material? How do you get enough information to make things work? We know we have the material, we know we have the samples, we know we have all of the starting points, but is subsurface storage a better solution for India? Or is it better to do surface storage? There is enough surface exposure of basalts in India, in the Deccan basalts. There is enough rubbleized basalt already available in India. And so it's possible that subsurface solutions might not be the ideal way to go. And that's the part which really will need to be determined. Most probably the team that is here is not addressing that, but that will need to be determined at some point or the other. Is surface mineralization in Deccan basalt a better way to go? We don't know. Having gone through with all of the exposure, with all of the building materials, with all of the dust, basalt dust that is up in the air, for me, it's easier to have mineralization of the dust, which has a dual purpose of cleaning up the air and fixing the carbon dioxide. The other part which is interesting here is to look at mine tailings, where you can take tailings from mining operations and alter them with carbon dioxide so that you form very weak building blocks. And so those are some of the ways in which we can examine the storage potential in basalts. Now, before we move away from here, let me just give you a brief idea about do you have any questions till now?
Ma'am, when we talk about basalt, then
Yes.
it is an igneous kind of a rock.
Yes.
So that means that if we want like having more vesicles in
Yeah.
the basalt, that means there has been volcanic activities taking place in those regions, which
Yes.
has provided us that recent basaltic rocks. So it might happen that in the long run there can be more volcanic activities which might come up. So will it not affect the project?
Okay. So volcanic activity is has you can map it. You know where it is occurring, where you have either hotspots or subduction zones or rift valleys. So these are not random processes. So, for example, the Deccan basalt was a hotspot that wandered across and spewed a lot of basalts. In the case of Iceland, there is a rift, the mid-Atlantic rift, combined with a hotspot, because normally you have mid-Atlantic ridge or mid-oceanic ridges which are submerged in the ocean. In the case of Iceland, it comes up to the surface is because that's combined with a hotspot. The hotspot is upwelling lava that pushes everything up, and so now you have a combination of that. So you can map these processes fairly well. I would not want to do sequestration, for example, in Yellowstone, because it's an active area. So, but you can do that in other places which don't have any activity of magma, but they have old magmatic activity. For example, out here in the Deccan or in Columbia River, right? So the magmatic activities are fairly well known, fairly well established on where to find them. So you would not expect to see fresh magmas coming out in Deccan basalt.
So those volcanic activities which has a larger return period, there we can work upon.
Right, or which have been done and over. This is millions of years ago, and today we don't expect that because the hotspot has wandered or has subsided. So it's not going to happen. Okay, barring major tectonic shifts, which we really don't expect. So, in geologic terms, it's almost like saying never. We never say in earth sciences, we never say never, but that's as close as you can come to saying never. Okay. So this is some of the work we're doing for a depleted gas reservoir. And this is a gas reservoir in Japan. The part that we are really struggling with, and if you have any suggestions and comments, I would love to hear that. We have two different things. Just disconnect now. Okay. There it is. Okay. So this is the same type of sample. These are two different plugs from the same rock. What we're finding is these are sandstones. They came to us as sandstones, and we said, oh, this is very easy. We can do this in a very simple manner. If you remember the slide on mineralization, sandstones were not supposed to mineralize. What we're seeing here is single fluids where we are only putting in, these two are dry measurements for bulk modulus and shear modulus. Bulk modulus, shear modulus are very, very similar. And when you put brine in, there is a slight effect, and that's really not much. In the case of bulk modulus, you have a very large change, and we expect that. That's the fluid effect on bulk modulus. Shear modulus should not see it. When we mix the fluids, so in this case, we measured dry and we measured brine with separate from carbon dioxide. When we mix them, we see the these are the two moduli, the dry case and brine saturated case, and we see a much larger difference here. So that's your single fluids here. When we combine them, we see that they separate out much more. And so what we are trying to do is to say, how much difference does the combination of fluids do and why? If it's only a fluid effect, if there is no mineralization effect happening, then we shouldn't be seeing that large difference that we do here. And so the challenge really becomes to say, there is a statement that is made. Is it really true? And is it true for all cases? In our case, we think that yes, it is true if you have pure sandstones. If your clay content is less than 10%, if your clays are not expanding clays, if you have kaolinite or illite, yes, that's possible. As soon as you have feldspars, which is very common in sandstones. As soon as you have some amounts of plagioclase, also common in sandstones. When you have clay minerals, also common in sandstones, you will see some sort of alteration effects, and these will happen on the order of weeks. These are experiments that Dorothy has been doing since 2 years. Each one of them takes the whole cycle of baseline measurements with dry and brine saturated case, and then with single fluids and with multiple mixed fluids. Takes about 2 months to complete. She's done about 8 of the rocks, and she's done benchmarking with a standard sample every now and then. She's done about 5 times benchmarking. So that's about 14 months of work, and we cannot explain the data. So I've presented to you till now how easy and how simple and everything is cut and dry. But when you get down to it in a practical sense, there are always questions that are unanswered. There are data that you cannot explain. There are data that you cannot explain for its effects on types of fluids that you have. In some cases, in the benchmarking case, really nothing changes. When you go to the real rocks that have actual minerals that are modifiable, that are reactive, everything changes. And so if you are examining a new field, if you're looking at storage, and in India, geologic storage is new. There is not any project that is happening that is on geologic storage, which means everything is a green field. What I'd like you to walk away from this with is to say you cannot translate things that are observed in Iceland, things that are observed in Norway, in US, to the Indian scenario. Yes, there will be similarities, but there will be site-specific differences, and business as usual does not work. And that's something that I think is very critical. We learned it here. This was not just this was not just in the case of standard rocks. This was because also the source of silica was different here. This is biogenic silica. Biogenic silica is much more reactive than quartz. After it becomes quartz, it's not reactive anymore. So what I'm trying to tell you is that things that appear simple, that appear straightforward, might not be the case. And so what we have found in the hard way is that it might not be possible to explain things. We do compare. So this is some of the work that Dorothy is now doing. Her samples are these ones with black dots. They are all over here. They're on the lower side of the spectrum. They match much closer with some of the rocks that are from the North Sea, from Blangy. The rest of the rocks are all higher. And so if you separate out the material, you can get a nice relationship, but you need to know what exactly you're doing and why would you be doing something like this. So again, the part which becomes interesting is these are typical relationships that we draw. This is the normal trend. This is what Dorothy is measuring, off by quite a bit. Not what we want to see. Well, not we want to see, not what any student wants to see. For me, it's fascinating. It means there's a problem to be solved. But for a student who wants to graduate, this is the worst nightmare, because now she has to spend more time to explain why her data are here. And she's checked the data 20 times to say, indeed, this is not fluke, it is happening. She's compared it with data from the site. These are ODP data from the area, and these are data that are collected, and she's right here in the middle of those data. These are special rocks, these are ash beds. So we know they are ash beds. And so I think I'll stop here to say that the part which is more troubling for us is to find a proper model that we can work with and have enough skepticism to say if it was not developed at site, it might not be valid for the site. Okay.